Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. Today's video is going to be a top 10 of my favorite teal eyeshadows, including swatches. So let's get cracking. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. If you're into eyeshadow palettes, Essence and Catrice, and getting the use out of your makeup the way that I am, then definitely stay tuned because I think today's video might be right up your street. I decided for 2023 to go over my top 10 favorites in a given color category and just give you a nice little overview of that. I did taupes last month, but one of my other favorite shades is teals, so I thought we could do that next. It's not very February-esque, but whenever would you wear teals? Maybe in the summertime for most people, but I feel I can wear teals all year round. So, in case you're unfamiliar with the channel, you don't know what I'm all about. Hi, my name is Maaike. I'm from the Netherlands. I create content all about from my fair-skinned, cool to neutral undertone perspective, and because I have been making beauty content in some way, shape, or form for more than a decade, I have some strong favorites as well, some strong opinions. And if you would like to join the Snow Angel Club, all you need to do is click the subscribe button down below. So yes, today we're going to be talking about teal eyeshadow, but before we get to the actual shades, there are two things I need to actually point out because I got some comments last time when I showed you taupes where people seem to not really fully understand what I was trying to do. This is not about comparing shades. I'm not trying to see what the best teal eyeshadow is today. I'm just giving you 10 of my favorites. And I'm going to show you each one sort of like individually, and just for completion's sake, I'll make sure to include an overview of all of the shades swatched out together so that you can see that usually when I have a favorite shade, it kind of falls within the same sort of bandwidth. I'm pretty sure once we get to like purples, there may be more differences there. So yeah, I'm not gonna go over undertones and like the true differences of these shades because that's not the purpose of the video. I'm just giving you a list of my 10 favorites. Also, a lot of my favorite eyeshadow shades are blends of a taupe being like a gray and a brown, and today teal is a mix of blue and green. However, once you start mixing shades, a taupe can still be a taupe even if it has more brown than gray. And with a taupe, you can very easily like throw in like a bit of purple or a bit of green to still have a taupe shade, because if you were to put it next to other greens, it's not gonna look green at all. It's definitely going to look like gray-brown, but then it has a subtle level of green to it. And those are the kind of taupes I like. Similarly with teals, and now we're getting to the actual teal shades. As I mentioned, teal is a mix of green and blue, and of course green is already a mixture of blue and yellow. So if you have a teal, it can lean more green toned or it can be more blue toned depending on how the shade is mixed. And this is why a lot of people, also even like beauty creators who I follow, call them greens or blues. But then it's actually a teal. Because if you were to put these next to actual straight up blues or actual like straight up greens, you're gonna see that they're gonna be a little bit off. And the reason why they're off is because they fall in between that category. Now officially, if I remember correctly, a teal is officially part of the blue family. Do with that what you wish, but that's what I've heard. And when it comes to teal, I love combining teals and taupes actually in a single look, and I feel they're very flattering on me, especially because it has the blend of the blue and the green. If you find a blue too intense for you, you find it too like cool toned if you have a warmer undertone, and then a teal can be great because it has that green that tends to lean a little bit more cool toned in there, a bit more neutral, and that can make it work for you. It may just look a little bit differently on you. And if, for instance, you're very fair and you're very cool toned like me, because it does have the blue undertone, it definitely can like make greens a bit more bearable. Like if you have these very warm greens, it doesn't always look right. So because it's the blend of the two things, I feel it works really well. And in a way, it's like a more saturated version of a turquoise. That's how I think of it in my brain. So a turquoise is also like not quite mint, but not quite blue, but it's somewhere in between. And then I feel if we turn up the saturation and we deepen it up, that's when we get a teal. So that's where I'm coming from with this. And these are just my favorites. Now I have one honorable mention, and then we have my top 10. And the honorable mention I have to give you is the instigator of my love of all things teal, and that's this guy. It's the Road Movie Quad from Chanel, and this is the thing I bought way back when, and this made me realize, these two shades here, made me realize how much I love teals. Now here we get one that's a bit more blue tone and one that's a bit more green toned. I prefer teals that lean more towards the green side. I don't love them if they're overly blue, because I don't feel, then I might as well just wear a blue eyeshadow, I feel. But this I do really like. So this shade especially here from the Chanel Quad, it's one of my favorites, and that's why I had to give it a mention here. I'm not sure if this is still available. I think it may be. I've seen it around. But yeah, this is just the instigator, but in terms of quality, this Chanel eyeshadow isn't necessarily my favorite, so that's why I can't dub it a favorite of like a top 10, but because it's so important for me falling in love with teal eyeshadow, I was like, I have to mention it. I have to mention it. But now we're getting to the true top 10, and people who've been with me for a while know how much I love the ABH Subculture shade called Axis. It's actually one of the deepest shades we get in here, and it's this one right here. Now, some people would call this a green. I call this a teal because it definitely does have some blue to it. And the reason you can check that, especially if you have something that's a bit more yellow or mustard leaning, a teal will blend into that very easily without it looking overly green. Because if you blend a blue and a yellow, you'll get green. But if you have a teal that already has green in it, you're going to get a little bit more of that blue coming through as well, if that makes sense. So I love blending shades like this out with like yellows or mustards and those kind of things. They work really well with these warmer tones for people with warm tone skin, but they blend really nicely into something like this more taupey, mauve-y leaning shade as well, because they have that blend of colors. And Axis, it may very well be the reason why I keep the Subculture around, because I love that shade so much, even though it's one of the most difficult shades to work with. It's one that stains, it's one that can be a bit fallouty if you're not very careful with it, but it's so pretty, and I think it's very funny because I had a look at the overview of what I've got lying about. And with the taupes, I was all about the shimmers. Like, I love a taupe shimmer, but a lot of my favorite teals are mattes. And I don't love mattes, but teal mattes, I love. Teal shimmers are actually really hard to find, I find. But yeah, Subculture, Axis, one of my favorites. I also feel we get some good things in the Muerte from Melt Cosmetics. So in here, I also really like these two navy shades that we get in here, but this matte. Like this. Do you just see that it's not quite blue, but it's also not green enough for it to be a true green? Like, it's got that blue undertone to it, and that's what I love. This is the shade Duelo, and my Spanish is not great, but this is such a lovely shade. And with this, like, you can make it more green, but if you were to pull in the blues, this is going to look more blue. I love that shade to pieces. It's another one of my favorites. It's such a good, stunning, like, teal, blue-ish green shade that kind of bridges the gap. Works well with taupes, works well with neutrals, but it can be made more warm-toned if you were to blend in some of those other shades. Then one that's a bit more blue-toned is in the Shroud Arcana palette. And this palette is just, it's amazing to begin with. I mean, these greens are amazing, but then we get this. And I mentioned in my intro how I don't love blue teals. Like, I'm not a huge fan. But this one, there's something about it. And it's probably because it has this like murky, grungy undertone. And that's why I love teals. Because if you want grunge, if you want the grungy vibe, teals. Teals is what makes the grunge. It's, again, because it pairs well with the mustards and like warmer tones, but it can also play really well with cool tones. It really nicely bridges that gap. And it just works every time. And if you want to murky something up, but without it looking dirty, teals, and especially this one. And this is one of my favorite like jewel tones, grungy vibe sort of palettes to begin with. Like, this entire thing I love. But this, I mean, and then like blend it with that. So pretty. Like this in the crease, that all over the lid, maybe with that blue Maybe with these greens. Like, I can already just see 3 different looks that I can do with that one shade. Stunning, stunning. Love it, love it. And then one of the very few really good teal shimmers is in the Bubblegum from BH. Now, this is a blue tone palette. It's all blue, but then we get this one. Do you just see how green it looks compared to actual blues? That's what I mean with teals being a mix of blue and green. If you put it with blues, it's going to look green. If you put it with greens, it's going to look blue. That's just the way it is because it's a mix of both. And this is such a stunning shimmer. Like this all over the lid. Like if you just do like a taupe like setup, like a lighter taupe in the crease and maybe something darker in the outer corner, all matte, and then this stunning number all over the lid. Chef's kiss. It's a look, it's a look, it's a look. It's grungy, it's smoky, it's got yummy goodness to it, and this shade is absolutely gorgeous. And then I've got a 2-in-1 for you because it's actually about the shades from this palette originally. This is the High Tide from Colourpop. But mine has yellows in because I took the shades out. Where did they go? They went into the Dream Street packaging because there were 3 teals in the Dream Street and 9 shades in the High Tide to create an all teal color story. So this is the only all teal palette I have ever like come across, and I put it together myself. So if you still have your Dream Street lying about, I believe, ooh, which one was from the Dream Street? I think it's like this Kaleidoscope shade that was originally in here. And then I think it was these 2, like this guy and this guy, I think. Maybe this, I don't know. One of the deeper 2 and like one of those, like one of these 2 mattes are from the Dream Street and everything else is from the High Tide. Now you can just see that right here, like these shades look almost minty green. But once you put them to like next to actual minty greens, they're not gonna look that green. Which I love. It's a perfect, like you get these like sea foamy kind of sagey leaning shades, but then again with a bit more blue. This shade actually reminds me of a nail polish I used to love wearing called Mermaid's Tears by OPI. It was part of the Pirates of the Caribbean collection. I love that one. That's like one of my favorite all-time shades. So yeah, I now have an all teal palette. So I'm set for teals for the rest of my life. I don't need any. But I do think that maybe, no, I'm not going to do that. Like pull it apart and make it parts of my singles collection. I was thinking that for a minute, but I don't need to do that. It's safe in this packaging to begin with. And I have all of my favorite teal shades all in one place. But in here, I think definitely like it's really about this like deeper matte right here in the corner. That's like my favorite shade. Lime Crime. Lime Crime can do some really, really cool shades. They were in my favorite taupe palettes, and now they're in my favorite teals. This is the Prelude Chroma palette, and this, I think you can tell right from the bat, right? This guy. This again looks a bit more green here. Like I said, I love my teals to be more green leaning rather than blue leaning. And this is great. This is just an awesome shade. And we even get a shimmer in here that goes with it perfectly. And then this is a great inner corner highlight. And it also is perfect, like topped over this to give it more depth and a bit more sparkle. So it's really the only reason why I keep this palette around, because these 2 I don't love. But the rest of the palette is really pretty. But these 2 I don't love. Yeah, that's the Lime Crime Prelude Chroma palette. Now remember what I said about the ABH, how the teals work really well with mustardy browns? Natasha Denona Gold. And I know a lot of people call these things greens. These guys. But they're not green. They're teal because they have a lot of blue. But it pairs so well with this mustard yellow in the middle. It's insane. I'm actually, by the time you're watching this video, will that already be up? I'm not sure, but at the moment I'm filming shorts to showcase like all of my different eyeshadow techniques, and one of my favorite eye techniques to do, I like doing with this palette. So I was like, I might as well just do these looks with some of the palettes I love as well and sort of recreate some of my favorite looks. So this shade from the Natasha Denona Gold is really stunning. It's called Python, in case you want to know. I'm not sure if you can still get your hands on it. So for the final couple of selections in this top 10 teal video, I'm also going to be showing you some actual singles. And I didn't do this in my taupe collection video, or top 10 taupe shadow video, and a lot of people were like in the comments, but what about these ones? I was like, yeah, they're good, but they're just not in my top 10. But with teals, I have a much more curated selection to begin with. Like, it's a much harder shade to find, and especially good ones that I like. So that's why I do have a couple of those in here. First up, Lethal Cosmetics. And this is my greeny teal sort of color selection, especially this shade. This, again, a little bit more blue leaning. You can see this is a bit more green leaning. This is the bluish one. This is Equilibrium, and this is one of my favorite Lethal shades. Now, Lethal Cosmetics does some really good colorful shadows. I haven't tried a lot of their neutrals though, but yeah, I love this teal, and it's a shimmer. And like I mentioned in the intro, like, I prefer a teal matte, but that's also because I find teal shimmers really hard to find. Like, they're just not that easy to come by, and this is a really good one if you're looking for one. Finally, it's sort of like a 2-in-1 because they're both in this palette, and I just like one a little bit better than the other, so that's why I sort of tried to rope them in together. But this is my blue, green, purple palette. And in here, I've got some Nabla shades, I've got Sydney Grays, I've got a whole host of things. Some of these things are currently in a single palette selection for sure, and it's about these two right here. So they're in the green section of the palette, but this is a teal from Nabla. It's called Babylon, and this is Sydney Grace's Thrilled. So this is a matte, this is a shimmer. I stuck my nail in. That gouge is not from usage. I wish it was. And these are just some of the best teals I've ever found, and I think you can still buy both of them. So if you just want one matte and one shimmer, Nabla's Babylon and Sydney Grace's Thrilled. And these are both not too green, not too blue toned yet. Like, you can see just the way it compares to these actual greens. You can see that this has a bit more blue running through it. And that's why these are some of my favorites. These are just two of my favorites for that reason, and I really enjoy these shades. They are stunning. I do have to say that the Nabla ones sometimes don't swatch all that greatly, and I'm not sure whether that's because they're just a bit harder pressed, but I believe that this one was actually one of the better swatching ones, but we'll see that. What you will have already seen that, but I'm about to film the swatches right now, so as a reminder to myself how well these things swatch. I have an entire swatch video, I think, up with this entire palette, if I'm not mistaken. I have swatches up with all of my singles, just so you know. But yeah, those are all of my favorite teal eyeshadows. I also just wanted to promote a shade here that we don't see a lot of people talking about often. We'll do that. I think I want to do like navies. I've got a color story anyways for like that I want to do. But yeah, if you still have any selections, like color selections that you want me to go over, that you want to see me do a top 10 with, then maybe I can make that happen. Like I mentioned, I already have a couple of them planned out, but not everything for sure. So if you want to see certain swatches, then maybe I can make that happen. So yeah, for now, that's it, what I wanted to share with you about teal eyeshadow. I really hope you enjoyed watching today, and that I hope you would like to stay tuned for more. I make this kind of video every single week, every single month, but I make several videos a week, and a lot of it is eyeshadow palette related content as well. So if you'd like to stay tuned for more, and then I hope to see you in my next video. Bye-bye!